Welcome to Tales from the Bridge. This is the board game special. So Sam, Marty, Kevin, and myself sit down with Ryan, and Ryan knows everything about board games. He is going to talk about science fiction board games, and we're going to get some new recommendations for some games. And we have a lot of fun here. We hope you enjoy it. All right, let's make our way over to the bridge. That we have Ryan with us today. Ryan is an old friend, but also he has the most extensive knowledge in board games that I've been acquainted with. And Ryan's owned a board game cafe and currently works with a board game company. So he's the guy to talk to if you've got questions about board games. So there are many science fiction board games out there, and I've played a couple. One in particular, if you just look over Ryan's shoulder there's a picture, a painting from Scythe. Yeah. Which is, I guess it would be my favorite. But Marty, I think you've played Scythe before. Ryan, can you tell us about that game before we kind of get into some stuff? Because that's a pivotal game, or at least it was a few years ago. But
I think there's two reasons why I'd say it's probably notable. The first one actually doesn't have anything to do with the game, and it's more about how it's sold. I think at the time it may have been the top grossing Kickstarter funded project of all time. It may have just been top funded board game possibly, but it was like one of the very first ones to ever like break $1 million. Like that was unheard of for a tabletop game. And it was largely due to the other interesting fact about it, which is a lot of this game actually came with theme first. So most games, at least, I mean, it's not quite 50-50, but most games, they have the mechanics and then they put a theme over it that they think fits the game. This one was based very much on the art, which is sort of a like dystopian alternate history 1900s, where we went from like a highly mechanized tech friendly society that like hit a pretty hardcore collapse and then went back to like agrarian culture. And so it's this mix, this like amazing, beautiful mix of like people working the fields, like hand working the fields, but they're being overseen by these like giant mechanized monsters, these big techs that come from, this place called the factory, which in game is like the center of the board. And, the game itself, you're playing different factions and you're vying for resources and space. And it's sort of what we would call a 4X game, which is a subgenre of strategy games. And it's 4X is for explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. And it's sort of like you're trying to gain the most, land and purchase on the board. I mean, in the end, like all games, it's whoever has the most points wins, but it's great. Yeah. And it was also a game, I think, that got a lot of people into the hobby because it looked so amazing. There were these like beautiful little plastic figurines and the resources like look real, like little barrels and little sacks of flour and stuff that you could collect and actually like carry with you with your mechs and stuff. And yeah. It was definitely pivotal for like expanding the tabletop hobby, even just in the last couple of years. And that's by a company called Stonemaier, which has done, since then, notable games like Wingspan, which is one that's kind of everywhere right now. It's if you've seen that box with the bird on it in stores, it's like a tableau building game. And they've had a lot of success, largely springboarded by that and a few other kind of pivotal titles.
And then also, another pivotal title would be, I believe it's the same designer that refaced, I think you were telling me about this, Ryan, they refaced or reskinned a game to make it the Red Rising, which is the Pierce Brown books. Yeah,
the book series. Yeah, Jamie Stegmaier, who's the owner of Stonemaier Games, one of the owners, he is a hardcore Red Rising fan. And he basically just decided he was going to go for the license and see if they'd let him do it. And the company that owned the license was, they were just like, yeah, they kind of looked at his pedigree and was like, yeah, of course, if you'd like to, advertise our book series for us through a game, that's great. And he took sort of like a basic, I can't actually remember the original game that it's based on, but it's a fairly simple kind of like hand management card game. But it's one of those things that because he was such a fan and had so much passion for the source material, people have really enjoyed it because he really took the characters and the feel of it and kind of put it into this like small box card game. Actually, it just came out, I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 months ago. But yeah, it's kind of neat. And it's also nice when you see somebody who's got a passion for that, that's like reached a point in his career where he can kind of just be like, I want to try this. And he can, right? Because he's got the clout to do it. So.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I am recently a rabid fan of the Red Rising trilogy. I've been reading Golden Sun all week.
Nice.
I can't put it down. It's amazing. I've been having a great time with it. So I'd love to play that game. Yeah.
Yeah. It's got some pretty great depth for its readability. I found it's a pretty quick read, but there's a lot there to love for sure.
There is, right? And he knows what to do with plot, right? Like it just like it moves.
It hums. It hums.
The pages turn. He gives you what you want. Like we read a lot of different sci-fi here, and I get pretty philosophical, and I'm kind of snooty, and sometimes, and like, and then once in a while, I realize like, no, sometimes I just want somebody to give me all the stuff I want. I want the spaceships. I want the battles. I want the grab boots. I want like death. I want love. The whole deal. It's just packed. It's great.
Yeah.
So a game like that would be great.
And you still do feel like you get the character building too. Like, that's not left behind either, which is nice too. So yeah. Cool. No, it's a really great one. Yeah.
Well, I want to jump into here with a game then. Like my wife got us Terraforming Mars for Christmas last year.
Yeah.
You know that one?
Yeah. So that game only came out so in board game terms, if something came out 5 years ago, it was like forever ago.
Okay.
And it is still at like number 4 in the top. So there's a site called BGG, Board Game Geek, which is like the seminal place to find any information ever about any board game you've ever wanted to know about. There's about 125,000 listings. And there's about 5,000 games that come out every year. And it came out 5 years ago, and it is in the top 10 of 125,000 ranked games.
Wow, so, that's impressive.
Oh, that game. So it's from a company called Stronghold. A guy named Stephen Bonacore brought it over, and it just caught fire. It's insane. It's a great game. It's a tile layer. It's interesting too because they put a lot of work into theming the mechanics really well. So like you're trying to essentially, you're terraforming Mars. So you're attempting to get the temperature to the appropriate place. You're attempting to get the hydration, like the water proper, the amount of green space, and you're trying to balance all of that while achieving your personal objectives. Some people have.
What about the magnetic core, though? Anything to do with the magnetic core?
Exactly.
Don't you have to shoot dark matter at it, like Jim Al-Khalili said?
I'll be honest with you. There's about 6 expansions, so it's probably coming. It's probably coming. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. No, have you had a chance to try that yet? Actually, have you tried?
Well, I tried it, and the reason I ask is, I mean, we're not huge gamers in my family. Sure. My kids are, they're 10 and 13 too, and we've been at it for a few years. But like this one just seemed so hard. Like,
the thing I would say about it, and I found
trying to figure it out.
So I've only played it maybe twice. The first time I ever played it was at a convention, which was not the appropriate place for that. I bounced off it pretty hard. The other thing to know about it, is because there's so many cards, it's very card based and hand management and deck management based. And there's so many different paths to victory that until you've played it a number of times and gotten to know kind of what's in the deck, what's coming, I felt anyway often that I'm like, I just don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm going to do my best, but there was always just somebody else at the table that was like, oh, okay, they have a path. I don't have a path. And it is one of those games that like people that I know that love it, it's kind of a lifestyle thing. Like they play it all the time. It seems like a game that like, it's tough to be casual at. And there are just those types of games, and especially ones that rely so heavily on knowing what's coming and planning for it, because most of the game is just planning for the like something in the future, right? It's like getting ready. This is going to trigger when the temperature reaches a certain point, or this is going to trigger when you've got so much green space. And if you don't know the pacing, it can be difficult to get into, and that's a very common complaint. Actually, you're not alone in that at all.
Okay,
no.
I'm not an idiot, a gaming idiot.
No. And again, when I'm talking about this being like a top ranked game, the type of people that would take the time to rank a game like this are the same type of people that would probably play this game 40, 50 times. You know what I mean? So that's something to consider too.
Cool. Do you know, like for those people listening who are kind of just getting into gaming, and we always, my family get a board game a year sort of thing.
Okay,
and, a 12-year-old and 2 40-somethings. Like, what's a good sort of intro game that we can all sort of get into? It's got a sort of easy learning curve, but there's some depth to it. It's a sort of, Catan and this sort of thing comes to mind, but I'm wondering if you've got something maybe a little more exciting and action driven that sort of engages a 12-year-old, but also engages a 45-year-old,
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. Like, you've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune in to 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
Right. So were you wanting to kind of stick in the sci-fi vein, or are you just kind of looking for anything?
No, we're open. We're open to anything. Sci-fi is favored, as we are.
Okay,
sci-fi show.
No, sure. Of course. So one of the things actually that I think would probably fit very well is a game called Galaxy Trucker. It's kind of I don't know. At this point, it'd be sort of known as a classic, but it's kind of got this hilarious premise where you've been hired by like the cheapest space freight company in the galaxy. They've got no money, and you have to sort of like put together your ship out of garbage and try to get your haul from one end of the galaxy to the other without your ship falling apart. And so like the actual playing of the game, the first part that takes place is everyone in a timed round frantically grabbing tiles and assembling their ship, hoping they're putting something together that will work. And then the next 3 rounds is basically random card draws trying to destroy you. So like meteor showers, aliens, like, and things will happen and like parts will fall off your ship and it'll cause parts to explode. And all of a sudden like a fuel cell goes and you'll lose one of your pilots. And, and by the time you're at the end, you've only got like part of your ship left. But if you make it to the end, even with like one pilot and an engine, you might win, because everyone else might have been completely destroyed by that point. I don't know. I love it because it's entirely random. So you don't get those things where no one feels bad, because even if you win, like, yeah, you kind of did it yourself, but it's also just luck a bit. And in either way, everyone has a bunch of fun. Even if your ship explodes, it's hilarious. Right. There's also a bunch of different like modes. You can all work on one ship, or you can each have your own. And yeah, it's something that 12-year-old absolutely could get on board with. And I love it personally. I think it's hilarious. And they actually just came out with a like really good price point new edition of it, where they've streamlined some of the rules. It just came out this year, actually, from CGE. So yeah, it's nice. A great one. Yeah,
that sounds pretty perfect, actually.
It's delightful. It really is. It's hilarious. Yeah, and the fact that it's real time like gives you that little bit of pressure and panic that like I find that like kids respond to. I don't so well. But like I find kids really like it, and they particularly like my daughter loves it because it makes me sweat. So like she loves beating up on dad, right? So yeah,
and it's got a good rating on BoardGameGeek.com. 7.
Oh yeah, it's a classic. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah, nice.
Hey, you know what else I always find really interesting with kind of tabletop gaming is the community around it that I'm only ever tangentially a part of. But you mentioned going to a convention. Can you talk a bit about that community? You know, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess like any sort of hobby, it's very small. I mean, I feel like it's big because I live in it, but it is very small, and it's something that I kind of have to remember sometimes. But like, I don't know. I find for the most part, I mean, there's jerks everywhere, right? But I'd say the vast majority of tabletop people that enjoy tabletop, they just want people to play with. It's definitely now, thanks to like, I don't know, some certain celebrities, it's becoming more a thing that people know about. Like, it kind of started with Will Wheaton and Felicia Day sort of like pushing it. And now you've got like Henry Calville on the Graham Norton show talking about Warhammer, which like Yeah. So because of that, like I find that people have become a lot more welcoming than they may have been in the past, just because they feel like they can be more open about it. You know what I mean? Some people tend to be more guarded if they don't think people are going to accept it. Whereas that now, we just want people to play. We just want people at the table. And that was kind of how I found it when I first started, is people were just so excited that I wanted to know that they would just talk to me about it endlessly. Like, like most people do about anything they're passionate about. It's like, wait, you want me to talk about the thing I love? Great. I'll do,
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, the only barrier to entry for the most part I find is tabletop in general can be sort of a pricey hobby depending on how you engage with it. I mean, if it's something where you've got like a local game cafe, or even libraries now have, kind of like you can borrow a game and take it home and things like that. But yeah, no, the community in general is very welcoming. It's obviously been tough over the last few years for everyone to get together and do that stuff. But there's some great local cons that they keep pretty affordable, and they're mostly playing cons. They're not even about, some of them are about going and buying stuff, but for the majority of these are just about going and sitting and playing. Big library of games, pulling them out. Yeah, it's actually, I went to Breakout Con 2 years ago, and it was one of the first things I've ever been to where like complete strangers would actively just be like yelling to other people about like, hey, we need one more person, and like not wanting to know anything about them or what they'd done. It's just like, hey, will you take up a seat? Great. Come and sit down. And
if somebody was interested kind of in getting involved, what would be a good starting point for them?
Meetup is an amazing site. Meetup.com. You can search by area or by hobby. You can even like whittle it down to like, I like party or light strategy games meetups in my area, and it will like, you put in your postal code, you put in your likes, and it will find groups for you, which is pretty awesome. It's definitely the way that if you don't already have even one person in your area that you could play with. The other thing is with the pandemic, things like Tabletop Simulator, which when this started was a very kind of like low rent way to play board games online. People put a lot of work into it. Yucata is another site that people use a lot. Board Game Arena as well are things that you can play all these games with people online. But in terms of doing it in your own community, something like Meetup, something like Facebook is also a great way to kind of meet up with people. And at the end of the day, if you can't find that, you be the person. Find a game you like, do the research, buy it, learn the rules, and just have some friends over, right? I mean, that site Board Game Geek is incredibly good about if you wanted to do research. There's, depending on the game, there's endless ways for you to find out if it's for you. There's playthrough videos, there's how to play videos, there's reviews, there's written reviews, video reviews, 100 different ways for you to find out if that thing is for you, right?
Awesome.
Yeah,
cool.
I want to know more about one game in particular, and that's a game where you shoot things, you like flick at like jets or spacecrafts. Remember that one, Ryan?
Oh, it's called Flip Ships, and it's by an amazing man named Kane Klanko, who just has this like incredible design style, and everything he comes out with feels a little different. But his big thing is like real time and dexterity. So oftentimes you're having to do something physical within a certain amount of time. And so basically what he did is he took like Space Invaders and turned it into a tabletop game. So you've got rows of ships via cards coming down the table, like moving down every round. And then you've got this series of ships and a little block, and you're literally flicking it, trying to like get it to land on cards. If you get it to land on the cards, you destroy the ships, and you're just trying to keep rows and rows of fleets of ships back. If they ever reach, Earth, you fail, and it's they get harder and harder as the game goes on. But if you last, I can't remember how many the rounds are, but there's a little counter, and if you manage to last the amount of rounds the counter goes, you win. And it's got all different game modes, and yeah, it's pretty fantastic. There's also a solo version of the game where you use dice instead of flicking called Falling Skies that just came out very recently. And it's great as well. But I think Flip Ships is what you were thinking of, right?
For sure. And it's the most arcade feeling tabletop game, where it feels like you have to stand in front of and do your flicking to destroy ships, and then you're letting the next person go and stand there or sit there and do their flicking. It felt arcade-ish.
And there's this like great thing where the mothership is it's 3D, and when you put it together, it makes kind of a box. And if you somehow manage to get that perfect flick and it hits the mothership, you just like get this incredible bonus that like clears 3 rows. And it's just like, it rarely happens, but when it does, it's this like everyone jumps up and like cheers. And that's also the beauty of a co-op game, right? Like everyone's working together. It's everyone's kind of cheering for each other. Yeah. That changes the whole vibe for sure.
Cool.
Nice.
I have a bunch of friends in BC who are big tabletop gamers, and I only visit them once in a while. But many years ago, and this is my quiz question for you. Again, the game I remember that I can't remember the name, and it was this great like spaceship kind of game, and it was very real time. And you were on a team, like you had a whole crew, right? So somebody was the captain, somebody's running the weapons, somebody's running something else, and there's dice being thrown, and everybody's yelling at each other all the time, like and somebody's navigating. And
yeah, it's by a guy named Jeff Engelstein, and I think what you're talking about is Space Command Dice Duels. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Space Command. That sounds
something
about right.
like that. He did a whole series of them, but I think it is Space Cadet Dice Duels, and it's you're all working on a team, and it's real time. It's frantic, like even thinking about that game gives me anxiety. Actually, it's very difficult too. It's incredibly like I don't even think like I've probably played it maybe a half a dozen times. I don't even think we ever won.
Right.
Because it is which is what you want from a co-op game, to be honest with you. You want a co-op game to be difficult, so you get lots of plays out of it. But I think it's Space Cadets Dice Duel, and Jeff Engelstein is the designer of that one, and he does a lot of that real-time stuff. And it's great. But it's
a fun party game. I mean, it was we have
frantic,
nothing but memories of playing that one time. It was like, hey, remember that time we played that crazy game?
Right. And it's it's the beauty of, real time, and it's the beauty of cooperative play, right? It's you get those awesome memories.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I often wonder if tabletop gaming is kind of the anti-video game, because I mean, I'm in a household where there's a lot of video games being played, and we play board games as well.
Sure.
But certainly more video games. But, I can see a really great place for hybrid, a video game, a tabletop game where maybe there's like a high score online with a 2D barcode on the board. And I suspect there are smarter people than me who have thought about this in the past, but is there this hybrid idea, or is tabletop gaming more about being anti-online?
So I would say, like, even just a couple years ago, the idea of combining digital and analog within the community would have been much more like poo-pooed. But there's been a couple games just in the last couple of years that I think have really kind of turned people around. I feel like the way into the hobby for a lot of them was there's a lot of bookkeeping sometimes involved with certain types of games, especially when you deal with things like, mini skirmish games and things like that, where you're having to keep track of a lot of different statistics and stats of characters and effects. Okay, this guy's been hit, and so now he's got -2 to his defense, and all that sort of stuff. It can kind of bog down the experience. So a few that I would point out recently, notably something that I actually just played a few weeks ago, so it's pretty new. So there's a game called Descent, which has actually been out for a very long time in various iterations. But the most recent iteration is Descent Legends of the Dark. And it is a minis dungeon crawler where you pick a character and you're going through different levels. And in the older games, you would, similar to like something like Hero Quest, you would set up the board and you would set up the terrain and you would take your hero and you'd go in and you'd kill monsters and you'd collect loot and all of that stuff. You'd be managing cards, or you'd have a little stat sheet, and that's how you would keep track of everything. So this newest iteration, they released this beautiful app where when you start the game, you sign into the app and you enter what character you're playing, and you watch the terrain be created in front of you on screen. You then take the tiles out of the box and you recreate what you see so that you can play, on the table space. But, when I have the miniature of the wolf that I'm fighting out and I want to attack him, I'm able to go to the app and just, roll my die, hit how many hit him. I don't have to look up his stats. The app's like, you hit him for 5 damage. He ran away. takes care of that. So you get to just have the fun of the moving of the miniatures and making the decisions, but you don't have to do the bookkeeping. And honestly, it's one of the greatest things I've seen probably in the last like 3 years in terms of getting people to the table quickly, because there's not a big rules load, because the app also takes care of that, right? There's no question of like, oh shit, okay, I'm going to pull my sword out. Hold on, I got to grab the rule book. Flip, 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 flip. 5 minutes later, I finally hit the wolf. No, it's just the game knows what I'm supposed to do. And through that, by the end of the first scenario, you know most of the rules already. So it's helping you get to the table actually. So like, it's not taking away, it's enhancing that physical experience, which is amazing. And there's actually another one that came out recently called Chronicles of Crime, where you're playing a detective and you use an app on an iPad where when you're investigating the crime scene, you actually hold the tablet up and you can like look around the room, like looking for clues, and it's full 360. So like you turn around and look down, and like if you see something on the floor, an object or something, you then go back to the box and you find that card and you pull it out and you put it on the board. And it's again just like enhancing that in-person experience.
That sounds amazing. Like
it's really great. The Descent one in particular is just like it's the way I'm going to get my 8-year-old to play Descent. Like, yeah.
Well, we're going to include all the links to these games in the description of the podcast for anybody who's interested. Cool. Yeah, I had just occurred to me that would be an awesome way to kind of innovate around this, and obviously other people are doing it, so I'm excited about that.
And it's become much more accepted. Like there is always those, who are going to be like, well, if I wanted to play a video game, I'd play a video game, right? But it's the other thing is it's about accessibility, right? I mean, not everyone has a group either, right? So
True.
I mean, video games are, and it's something too that like I think it scratches a different itch too, right? Like when I have an urge to just like relax and do something by myself, I'd actually probably rather jump into a video game than play a solo board game. But if I want that, camaraderie and people around a table, then I go for something else, right? I don't think, but it doesn't have to be either or, right? People are blending them really nicely.
Yeah, I like what you said around reducing the bookkeeping, because who wants to do that?
Well, it's honestly, with the exception of price, it's the biggest barrier to people doing anything in gaming is having to learn the rules. The rules load, the upfront load of information that people have to take in to play things is what shuts most people down. It's something that kind of as one of the main game teachers in my group, I've had to really try to figure out ways to streamline that experience and to like even like just drip feed things so that we can kind of get started in playing to engage people, and then kind of give them a bit as we go, because no one wants a 30-minute rules explanation by that time. 10 minutes in, people have checked out. So the industry is figuring that out and figuring out ways to overcome that as a way, like you were asking about, how do I find the hobby in general? They want more people to enjoy it, so they're trying to overcome those barriers, right?
Well, maybe we can find a way to have you walk us through a board game and do a game night. I don't know how we'll find a way to make it work on a podcast. I don't know if you can think of a game that would translate into audio. I think it'd be kind of fun. Or we just like, hang out afterwards some night and play a board game.
For sure.
We'll get chicken nuggets.
The way to do it. Yeah.
Well, the best way to learn a game is to have somebody else teach you. So maybe you could teach us all Terraforming Mars, and then we'll be able to play it.
Perfect.
Yeah, we got someone who owns it.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, we should figure that out. That'd be great. But just it's funny because just with Tristan asking me these questions, it kind of got me like looking at my own collection and like the amount of sci-fi specific stuff that I have. Because I'll be honest, when he first asked, I was like, I don't have any sci-fi games. And then I looked and I was like, I have like 8. Like 8 sci-fi games.
Cool.
And just looking at the Board Game Geek site, so of the top 10 highest ranked games on that site, 4 of them are sci-fi games. And in the top 20, 6 of them are sci-fi games. So like this is a theme that like clearly resonates with people, and it's everything from that Galaxy Trucker I told you about, which is like hilarious and ridiculous, to like Phil Eklund. He's got this game called High Frontier, which can take like 8 hours to play, and you start out with like a fuel tank and you eventually have to develop like a corporation that mines asteroids. Like there's and everything in between. It's cool. It's a pretty vast genre.
There is a game that I've always wanted to play but never had the time, and I think it might even be rated the best game. Can you talk about that game, Ryan? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Are you asking about TI4, Twilight Imperium?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what you're asking about.
So this is like one of the most complex games, would you say, that for sci-fi? And I guess just tell us about that.
I don't know. See, I don't know. That's always kind of a tough thing to say, just because everyone's capacity for those things is different. It's definitely one of the longest. It's notoriously long. It's one of those games where, like, if people are going to be playing it, they set aside a day for it. I've played it, I think, 3 times, and we've actually done pretty well. We've always kind of gotten our games under 6 hours, which is pretty good. At full player count, it can last anywhere from there to 8 or 9 hours, depending. So it's not even so much that it's complex. It's just that there's a lot of rounds, and it takes a while to reach the victory condition. But there's definitely a lot there, and it's back in that 4X genre, that explore and exploit and exterminate and expand genre. You play an alien race, and you have a specific type of power depending on the race that you play. And it's all about vying for space and control. And when you end up clashing in the same areas, you end up doing like warfare, air and ground combat and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely, and that's one of the perfect examples of like one of those like heavy rules load up front games, where the first time we played it, luckily my brother-in-law, God bless him, he was the one that taught the game. And so he did all the heavy lifting of like kind of drip feeding us the rules and, that kind of thing. But it is a pretty amazing one. There's also a little bit of politics in that game too, where there's actually like on top of all the regular, moving your forces around and doing all that, there's actual like politicking that happens as part of a round. You actually get to like vote on certain mandates that get put in place with the Galactic Council and things of that nature. So it adds another layer to it, other than just like, it's not just a combat game. There's some negotiation as well. And yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's great. You'd love it.
Yeah, if I can get the time. Can't do it with toddlers.
Yeah, it is. You do have to dedicate time to it for sure.
So what other sci-fi games do you have in there? You said you got 8.
Yeah, so just last week, actually, since I knew I was going to be on, we do a bi-weekly game night. And so I was like, all right, guys, well, we're going to get this to the table because I hadn't yet. It's called Rocketmen. And it's a kind of a deck builder hand management game where you are attempting to complete various missions. So you're trying to complete missions to certain planets, and the further you go, the harder the mission is to complete. And you have to sort of like it's various stages. So you have to like prep your mission. So you have to you have to decide what mission you're going to do. So if you're going to go to Earth or the Moon or Mars, I don't actually know where we're supposed to be. I assume the Mars mission is more just breaking free of our gravity, and that's what that mission is, because I don't know where else we'd be. But you select your mission, and then you get ready for it by getting all your engines ready and everything. And then once you're able to, once you have everything you need for it, you can launch. But there's always a hitch. And in this particular game, the hitch is you prepare everything, and then when you launch, you then have to draw from what is called the mission success deck, which is a completely random deck with different numbers in it. It's basically like rolling a die, but you're drawing cards instead. And essentially what happens is there's a certain number of spaces that are required to complete the mission, and you can push your ship as far as you can by prepping, but then it's all up to the cards. So you need to be able to, through your prep and those draws, get to the planet. And if you don't make it, your mission fails and you lose all of the funding that you had, and it gets wiped out and you have to start again. And so it's good. It's interesting. And I guess arguably thematic, because, all the prep in the world doesn't necessarily mean a successful mission. But yeah, no, it was pretty good.
What's it called again?
It's called Rocketmen. It's by a designer named Martin Wallace. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. But similar to Terraforming Mars, knowing the cards and the missions and stuff and what's coming, our second game will be vastly better than our first game. Our first game took a while. It took a while for anyone to get their missions off the ground at the beginning. But having played it once, we definitely would do it again. So that's something we played recently. Another one that we have, which is a fantastic one, which is more in the line of Galaxy Trucker in the sense that it's kind of goofy, is Cosmic Encounters, which is a negotiation game where everyone plays a different alien race. And the thing with that game is everyone's power, which is all different, everyone has their own individual player power, sort of breaks the game in a certain way and in a different way. So everyone's power is overpowered to the point where they're all balanced. So it's like they're all just broken enough to be fair. And you negotiate with each other to basically what you're doing is every round you want to try to win a certain amount of points. And if you do by the end, you win the game. But it's also one where like you can make partnerships, so you can actually win together with other people if you make the right connections. But you can also, promise that you're going to, hey, we're going to win this together, and then at the last minute pull out and kind of screw people over. And so it's that one's more of a pure negotiation game, which can be fun too.
That sounds fun. I'm into that.
Yeah, it's good. And there's
kind of game. Yeah.
It's been around for so long. There's, I don't know, like 50 different alien races, all with ridiculous powers. It's pretty fun. Yeah.
Can you give us one more suggestion for a sci-fi board game?
Lux Aeterna is what I'm going to go with. It's called Lux Aeterna, and it just came out. It's a solo game, actually, and it's in a tiny little box. It's a tiny little card game, and it's for one player. And the idea is your ship has become damaged basically beyond repair, and you are slowly being sucked into a black hole. And so you have a limited amount of time to essentially just last long enough to be rescued. And so without getting into the nitty gritty, you have cards that come out every round, and they can serve various purposes depending on where they're placed. And you have to make decisions every round about how you're going to use your limited resources. There's also, because there always is, there's a bit of a random element that can come up, but it's also a bit of a logic puzzle. Because you want to try to, am I going to try to fix this particular system? And if I fix that system, what's that going to help me do next? So it's about making choices and kind of doing triage on your ship. Okay, my life systems are failing. I need to keep those working long enough so that I can keep breathing, so that I can fix my O2, and that I need to keep that working long enough so that I can fix the radio, so I can keep sending out a signal. And it's great. It's only about maybe 20 minutes, and it's something that like you could just kind of like last time I played it, actually, we were at a brewery and we just busted it out and played it quick. We actually did it. We survived, which is actually the only time we ever survived. We played it like 6 times. But yeah, it's called Lux Aeterna, I believe is what it's called. But again, I'll send you the link for it, but it's fantastic, and you can play it solo. My wife and I play it together, but because you're just really making only the decision for one person. But it's pretty fantastic as a solo experience.
Sounds great. Yeah, that one I want to check out.
It's very, very good. Yeah, and the art's delightful, and it's a nice little small box. It's pretty great.
Very cool.
But one of the games in particular, which is another one that you might want to just at least look at, is called Anachrony. And it's by a company called Mind Clash Games. And I'd say of almost any company making modern board games right now, they do the best combination of mechanics and theme. And the idea behind Anachrony is the human race has basically been decimated in the future, and they have to send you back in time to try to prevent that. And so part of that is you have to go back in time and you have to like complete certain objectives and build certain things. And they have this really amazing mechanic where if you don't have what you need in the past, you can borrow it from yourself in the future. But because everything has a consequence, by the time you get to that future point in the game, you have to have those resources to pay because you have had to have paid yourself. So it's this idea of like taking from yourself in the future to do something right now and but you have to be efficient enough that by the time you get to that point, you have more resources so that you can pay for them. And it's this like amazing mechanic within the game that makes it stressful and interesting, but it's also just a beautiful thematic nod to the time travel genre. Anyway,
and the paradox of the
exactly
time travel as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very cool.
It's great. They also have these really cool little like mech suits that you can put stuff into, which is also fantastic.
I like that one too.
We all love toys, so yeah.
True.
Anyway, yeah. No,
Ryan, would you be willing to come back again if we could sort of
Oh
board
yeah,
game
I'll,
thing?
I'll talk about board games.
Or will you
as
run out
long
of
as you
board
want.
game material? You know, like is it the
No.
kind of thing you're like, I've talked about all my board games, leave me alone. What I haven't talked to you about are collecting stamps. And,
That's
you
right. That's right. That's right. Have you heard the good news? Yeah. No. No. It's all good. No, I'll talk about it for as long as you want. That's all good. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we kind of want to go and do some fantasy stuff. We haven't done that yet, and fantasy would be one of the most dominant themes in
I was
board
going to
games
say,
as well.
if you want to pick like the other half of themes, then that's is the fantasy genre for sure. Yeah,
Cool.
That's the other half of my collection. Yeah,
Next time.
that's right for sure. Yeah, anytime, guys. This was fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was outstanding.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you so
joining
much,
us.
Ryan.
Nice to meet you.
Anytime.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us. That was fantastic. We'll have you back again and talk about some new games for sure. We hope you enjoyed that. We hope we've got some board game geeks out there that were listening. So thank you for joining us today. Watch for a bunch of new episodes coming out in the weeks to come. All right. Until next time.